All right, so Canaanites, Phoenicians, merchants. All right, so if you never heard the word Canaanites or Phoenicians, you would have to know that these merchants. Let me see if I can. Nope, other way, other way. These merchants come from Phoenicia, and these merchants, these Phoenicians, are the exact same people. Canaanites, Phoenicians, exact same people. Okay. Let me read. Give you a little more history, then we'll go into definitions. Let's see. Here we go. Here we go. I put this on the screen. Some of y'all got this screenshot from a couple days ago. All right, this is from a. I think he was like he is. I don't think he's dead. I don't want to butcher the country, but somewhere in the Middle East. I'm not going to butcher that country. It's a law professor from the Middle East. Okay, I don't remember the country, but he talks about these people called the Phoenicians. Okay, well, it says this vast scope of trade conducted by the Phoenicians. Somebody remind me to talk about the Mediterranean Sea. That's what I'm supposed to be going to. The vast scope of trade conducted by the Phoenicians necessitated the establishment of a system of commercial law. So if I ask you, and this is the whole point of this, if I ask you where commercial law comes from, you have to say the Phoenicians or the Canaanites, which are the same people. All right, so they said the vast scope of trade conducted by the Phoenicians necessitated the establishment of a system of commercial law. Excuse me. They said trade on such a grand scale relied heavily on the establishment and rigorous enforcement of such legal norms. They said it had to be rigorously enforced till now that they are legal norms. Okay. They said this guy, I don't know his name. These Phoenicians often referred to as merchants. So they say it separately. They said they used to say it separately. MER space chance. A remarkable approach to maritime trade that went beyond mere commercial transactions. It says there, this dude says this is a law professor, y'all. I want to be very clear. This is not some, I didn't just, find some blogger on the internet. They said that their success, the Phoenician success, rested on a dual strategy aimed at enchanting other populations into purchasing their merchandise. They said these people called Phoenicians developed phonetics, and it was designed for universal understanding. They said, and before I go forward, I talked about this a couple days ago, but when I talked to y'all about the timeline of the common law of England, and that the real common law is between 510 BC until 1066. Okay, well, in 1066, when William the Conqueror came on the scene, okay, well, he changed the language of what they knew to be common law courts in England. They changed it from a language called Anglo-Saxon, which is where we get English from, but we don't speak the same English as before William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror came and changed the language, and he changed the language of the courts to French. They call Norman French. And then he changed over time the language of the island, England. All right, so this is very important, right? Because if you study William the Conqueror and the Normans and the French, okay, well, they were under one group of people. They were subject to one group of people, and that was the Roman Catholic Church, okay? They said they developed phonetics. These people called the Phoenicians developed phonetics designed for universal understanding. They said these Phoenicians are credited with the invention of phonetic spelling, known as Phoenician spelling. They said they pioneered the creation of letter symbols corresponding to individual sounds. You're like, what does this have to do with commerce and the Constitution? This is all have to do with it. It says, complementing this linguistic prowess, they said the Phoenicians employed incantations or formulae to orchestrate, invigorate, and promote their trading activities. And it says the Phoenicians dominated international sea trade. Okay? They said that. They said the Phoenicians are the ones doing this. Who created commerce? Who created commercial law? That's all. That's the question the whole night. The answer is the same. Okay? All right. The Mediterranean Sea. Since y'all are so helpful. I'm just being silly. All right. Let's go to Google Maps. Google Maps. Google Maps. Everybody go to Google Maps. And go to the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, where you're going to see, once you go to the Mediterranean Sea, you got 3 continents right here. You have Europe, Asia, Africa. And these people called the Phoenicians dominated it. I got a thing here. It's some book. It says the law merchant is the system of customs acknowledged by all commercial nations. And these customs constitute a part of the general law of the land. Their existence, the judges are bound to take notice of them. These customs are of the highest validity in all commercial transactions. Let me see. They say something else. They say the application of the law merchant is not confined to merchants. They said, but extends to all persons concerned in any mercantile transaction. They said, what you think is commerce is not commerce. You may be participating in commerce and not be a merchant. They said in the Middle Ages, the customs of merchants meant the actual usage of the European world. They said the courts took judicial notice of this private law, this private type of law called the law merchant. They said evidence of the law merchant is that you use it. They say you swipe debit cards every day. Okay, yeah, you're participating in commerce. They said you got Federal Reserve notes. Yeah, you're participating in commerce. Me too. I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm here too. You're on the internet. I'm on the internet. We got smartphones, and we pay right. Okay, well we're participating in the law merchant. Got a nice camera here. Cost a lot of money. Okay, well it didn't cost money, but it cost it, right? You streaming on TikTok. You got TikTok. Okay, yeah, you're participating in commerce, because what is commerce? It is the usages and the customs of somebody who created a system for us to be within, not for our benefit, for the benefit of merchants. You know what the word mer means? The word mer means sea. S-E-A. Remember I told you the Mediterranean Sea? Okay, well guess where they dominated? They dominated that little sea right there. Why? Because they got Europe, Asia, Africa. I mean, there's so many little nations right here. They got a place called Monaco, Barcelona, Algiers, Tanzania, Tripoli, Malta, Greece, Athens, Cyprus, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, Alexandria, You can go all the way up into Croatia with it. You can go all the way up into Istanbul with it. And these people called the Phoenicians, I don't know if I'll find it in time, but I got a thing from a Bible, it's an old Bible dictionary. They said, of course I ain't gonna find it. Let me see if I can find it. What are they called? Phoenicians. Let me see. Phoenicians. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. They said that these Phoenicians, here we go. This is a history book on admiralty. This is a law book on admiralty, and they're going over the origin and history of admiralty. They said, as far as it relates to this thing called admiralty, these people called the Phoenicians were traders. They said the shrewd Phoenician traders were carriers for the wise Solomon. Excuse me. And planted trading colonies throughout the Mediterranean. You know what they called those trading colonies? Ports. So if I ask you where admiralty law comes from, this making sense? I'm low-key giving you the secrets of the world right now. Low-key. Yeah, your favorite scammer ain't talking about this stuff. They talking about using negotiable instruments. Yeah, they talking about somebody who's not your friend. Right? They said these shrewd Phoenician traders were carriers for the wise Solomon. So these people ain't nobody. You know what I mean? They ain't no random group. These people were big dogs, okay? These people are big dogs, right? They said, let me see, what else I got? Yada, yada, yada. All right, I got a definition here. The Bible dictionary that I got. It says that for the definition of the word Baal, it's a fake god, but this supreme male god of the Phoenicians. It says worship had been practiced from the most ancient times and was adopted by the Jews. Remember, these Canaanites are technically Jewish. They're not called the people of God because the people of God obeyed his commandments. Remember, these people are under a curse. And everything they do and everywhere they go, they spread a curse. Does this make sense? So these people are technically Jewish. I mean, there's no such thing as Jewish, but you know what I mean. These people are technically, I know there is such thing as Jewish, but that's not. When they use that word to distract. They use a lot of things to distract, but these people would have been called Hebrews, but they wouldn't have been called the people of God. You understand that? These people didn't obey the Ten Commandments. They didn't obey the voice of God. They didn't do what he said. Right? These people were destroyed a bunch of times, and they kept creeping back up. Right? You go study these Canaanites. These boys, they were not righteous in the sight of God. Okay, all right. So Canaanites, Phoenicians, merchants. All right. What was I saying? These people explicitly worship Baal. Explicitly. I told you Elijah had to get rid of them. Okay. I told you this guy in the Bible named Jehu had to get rid of him. I told you that Jesus the Christ, he had to get rid of him. He didn't get rid of him like that. But he kicked him out of the temple. He had to kick him out of the temple. These are the same people. You see, these guys are not your friend. They're not my friend either, right? So these people called the Phoenicians worshipped a thing called Baal explicitly. Like, you can Google it. It's on Google. The Phoenicians worship Baal? Yes, they worship Baal. They'll give you some fake AI review of it. Let's see here. So, just to recap, the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, created merchant, maritime, and admiralty law. They established trading colonies, or for lack of, I can't find the thing. That's what I'm actually looking for. They said they established contracts along the Mediterranean Sea. They said they were master shipbuilders. Well, you study these people, they never touched a ship. they, I watched a fake, I don't know what you call it. It's like a fake AI documentary. You know, these little kids, they be making these little documentaries, but they be fake. They voice be all fake and stuff like that. Okay, well, this documentary that I watched, it said essentially what you would now know to be like the CIA. Okay, well, these people would have been that. They didn't touch anything. They didn't do no work. They made contracts. So that Bible dictionary, I can't find it, but it says they were master shipbuilders. Okay, well, they didn't build no ships. They didn't put their hands on those ships. They made contracts with people who built ships, and then they made contracts from things to go from point A to point B, point A to point B. And if you didn't fulfill the obligation of one of these contracts, well, that's okay, because they got some goons in this country and this nation. I mean, they control the Mediterranean Sea. So you go to Google Maps, look at all these little nations and where they can go from there. Okay, well, they can spread as deep as Africa, they can go as deep as Asia, they can go as far north as Europe. Okay, because they've made contracts from things to go from one place to the other. And I read it earlier, these people dominated international sea trade, whatever they call it. They dominate. This is commerce. The word mer in merchant means sea. This is what does mer mean? Mer means sea. Google it. You know what mer also means? It also means death. And you know these guys are cursed, so all they spread is death. So these merchants made contract after contract after contract after contract. And they got so much information off of all these contracts, is that they could predict things, they could control things. If you didn't fulfill the obligation, okay, well, we're going to send the goons from wherever to go handle why you didn't fulfill the obligations of your contract. And you're going to fulfill it one way or the other, right? This is, the little AI video I saw said that this was what the CIA, this is what have been what the CIA does today. They said they gather information from going port to port, getting information port to port, and they developed the alphabet and phonetics to match the words with what we now know to be letters. And then at that point, once it got developed, they controlled the language. So they could send secret messages in different words. And if you didn't come back with the right word, okay, well, they knew you didn't fulfill your part of the contract or whatever, and they would gather all this information over the years and just control the different nations over time. And they could just sit back in obscurity. They could just sit back and chill. They could sit back behind the scenes, behind the curtains, and just, oh yeah, we want them to do this. Okay, yeah, tell them they got to do this. We know they can't do it, so when they fail, we'll send the goons out, and then they'll do that. Okay, well, this is all commerce. This is all commerce. Commerce ain't, oh, I went to Walmart and got some gummy bears today. Okay, that's not commerce. Commerce ain't, I went to the movies and saw and Apple stock. That's not commerce. That's what they want you to think commerce is. No, sweetie. No. We've been deceived. All right, that's not commerce. All forms of, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. But all right, so let me see what else. Yep, these Phoenicians, yada yada yada. Yep, the Canaanites and Phoenicians explicitly worshipped Baal. All right, that's very important. The Phoenicians was a demonic cult who infiltrated the nations of Europe and assumed power through financial trickery. They called the Canaanites the Bar because they were barbarous. I wonder who else we know called the Bar. All right, let me see here, see if I missed anything. I guess I can't find that little Bible dictionary thing. But Liquid Death, bro. All right, so Phoenicians. All right, I guess that's it. So they controlled the Mediterranean Sea, and through all these contracts, they could control Europe, Asia, Africa, and they do. All right, so how did we get commerce? Through England after the year 1066. Does that make sense? Okay, so the Canaanites, they influenced Egypt. They changed into these people called the Phoenicians, same people. They influenced Babylon. And now, through another name, the same people, they now influence Rome. Okay. Right. How do I know that? Because I read you earlier that the book on business law from the 40s and the 50s said that they come from the Italian city-states. You look up the word city-state, they only apply to the Pope's territory. Okay. All right, let's go to the definition. Oh, I already went over all this. Okay, so I went ahead of myself. So Mediterranean, they controlled Europe, Asia, Africa as merchants, people of the sea. All right, so do they go back to Caesar? They are Caesar. They are. Remember, they're behind the scenes. We'll never know who they are. What about merchant marines? Same thing. Anytime you hear the word merchant, just know they're the people of the sea. All right. So anytime I read this earlier, anytime you hear any business language, I don't have an equation. I don't know nothing about Shem. That we're talking about Canaanites. We're talking about where commercial law comes from. And so, yeah, anytime you hear any business language, they said the law of insurance, banking, the law of sales, stoppage, liens, bankruptcy. Okay, all of that is from the merchants. This all comes from the merchants of the Italian city-states, okay? Well, merchants only means one thing. People who do incantations about the sea, all right? And incantations is incredibly demonic. Incredibly. Let me see here. All right, let's define commerce in the Constitution. Let's define commerce in the Constitution. So I'll read it again. Let me pull up the Constitution. It says that all legislative powers therein granted, this is Article 1 of the Federal Constitution. It says all legislative powers therein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. Excuse me. It says the Congress shall have power to regulate commerce. With who? With foreign nations, among the several states, and with Indian tribes. And then it says in the first article that no preference shall be given by any regulation of commerce. All right. So what is commerce as the Constitution states? They say commerce means trade. They say commerce is under the subject of trade and contracts. It says it is the exchange of commodities for commodities, consist in the various agreements to facilitate the exchange of products of the earth or the industry of man, intent to realize a profit. Now, that's not what commerce means. My mic is going in and out. This mic is going in and out. They're on to you. Oh no, they're on to me. That's okay. I'm recording it, so it doesn't matter what happens on the live. I know it sounds bad to you or for you, but I have it privately. I'm also on YouTube, so people on TikTok are like, what are you talking about? I'm reading comments from YouTube and TikTok, so sorry. All right, so commerce. Commerce is under the guise of trade and contracts. It is at commodities for commodities. It consists of the various agreements to facilitate the exchange of the products of the earth or the industry of man, intent to realize a profit. It says not only to include traffic, so they say traffic, but intercourse and navigation. So they tell you there, they tell you the definition. They said traffic, intercourse, and navigation. So if I ask you what commerce is, it is traffic, intercourse, and navigation. Okay? My YouTube name is the same as my TikTok name. Okay, now that's not commerce. What is commerce? Commerce is the usages and customs of the merchants, the law merchant, right? We had the book called Business Law. They got a book called Commercial Law. Okay, well, every time they say these people called the merchants. All right. So what is a merchant? As the Constitution understands it. It says one whose business it is to buy and sell merchandise. It says all persons who habitually trade in merchandise. Now it says it signifies, when they say it signifies, that's the real definition of a thing. It says it signifies a person who owns ships. So if I ask you, what is a merchant? A merchant is one who owns ships. And they say and trades by means of those ships with foreign nations. Okay? And they say, or with the different states of the United States. These are known by the name of shipping merchants. All right? Now, they cite a bunch of books in this dictionary under that definition, right? So here we go. They say, this book is from the 1790s. It says, everyone shall be a merchant who traffics by way of buying and selling, or bartering of goods, or any merchandise within the realm. So these are ancient English books. These aren't ancient English books. They're old English books. Ancient would be older than the 1700s. And then the next definition or the next citation they give says, if a man draws a bill of exchange, he will be a merchant for that purpose. Okay? And then let me see. This is from the 1790s as well. These are English cases they're citing. So they said the precedent of prescription of wares, whatever a wares is, foreign sold and foreign bought within the liberty of the city of York, is to be forfeited and seizable by the mayor, the sheriff, or the citizens. So one way you know if you're participating in commerce is if what you have can be seized. Does that make sense? So they said if something was foreign and of foreign origin, it could be seized. And they said it could be seized by the mayor, the sheriff, or other citizens. And this is ancient. This is England. And then they said, yada, yada, yada. They said they had a complaint from the citizens of Lincoln about foreign merchants. And so they seized the property of the foreign merchants. All right, so there's another book from the 1730s. It's very old English, so I'm not going to read it great, but it says, a merchant peculiarly belongs to him who traffics in the way of commerce by importation and exportation. And I can't read the rest of that stuff. Sorry. All right. Then I have a book from the 1650s. This is all under the definition of merchant as it relates to the Constitution. They said you can retain an attorney, and that attorney is for the action of a debt. They said it was agreed by all the justices that by the law of merchants, if two merchants joined in trade, yada, 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 they were shopkeepers, so they were merchants. As Edward Cook says, there are 4 types of merchants, yada, yada, yada. All right. What is the operative word of merchants? Is that they own ships and that they use those ships to traffic. What was the definition? To traffic, participate in intercourse. That word intercourse only means with foreign nations. Okay. The point I'm getting to is this definition explicitly relates to international affairs. Does that make sense? So you look in your state's constitution, because I know we don't do it, and you won't find commerce there. Why won't we find commerce there? So let me go recap. In order to define commerce, you have to define merchants. What is the law of merchants? It is trade. It is under the guise of trade and contracts. It is under the guise of buying and selling by way of ships. I actually erased that. So sea starts at the seas. It's done by ships. And what they do is traffic, intercourse, and navigation. Okay? Intercourse is participating in commercial activities with foreign nations. Okay? Trafficking, bringing things, what they say, importation and exportation, and then navigation. That could just be relate to how you get somewhere. All right? So commercial or commerce in the Constitution is only mentioned in Article 1. Article 1 is Congress. We read it earlier. Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce. They can't create it. It was already created. Who was it created by? They were created by merchants, who are the Phoenicians and the Canaanites, right? So they don't create commerce. Commerce has already been created. All they can do is regulate it. And if you participate in the usages and customs, what they say, the law of agency, the law of insurance, the law of transit by stoppage, liens, bankruptcy, okay, all of that stuff, guess what? You are subject to Congress in the United States. They said that English dictionary said all commercial paper. So sometimes you be filling out paper that is commercial. Well, guess what that's subject to? Okay, that's subject to commerce in Article 1 of the Constitution. Because the feds have power to regulate commerce. Commerce is a private owned type of law. It's a private body of law created by private people who you do not know who they are. But if you participate in their activities knowingly and unknowingly, okay, well, guess what? You're subject to Congress. Does that make sense? Anybody getting that? Sounds good to me. All right. Let me see if I missed something. All right, this is merchandise is all those things which merchants sell, either wholesale or retail. So this is something I said the other day. I think I said it, I don't know if I was on yesterday, but the day before yesterday, commerce is not you produce something and then sell it. Commerce is buying and selling, right? Walmart doesn't produce anything. They buy something and then Same. Then they buy something and then they sell it to us, right? That is commerce. That is what they call retail, right? Because they bought something and then they sell it to somebody else at another price. Does that make sense? And then they profit off of the difference. So that's different than if you had a piece of land and you produced something and then you sold that. That's not by nature commerce. Commerce is if you use somebody else's labor, or you trafficked somebody else's labor, or you participated in intercourse with a foreign nation. That's why you go to Walmart and everything's from China, all the food's from Mexico and Argentina, and oh man, we're not ready. Do we understand how the world works? There's nothing, almost nothing in this country that we have that is produced here anymore. I've been saying this for years. Everything in our reality comes off of an 18-wheeler. Everything. Our entire existence is based on people who drive 18-wheelers. Everything in our reality comes to us by way of a ship. Everything. Name it. It comes off a ship. Your food? Oh yeah. Comes off a ship. Most food is not produced here anymore. You don't believe me? Go look up those people called Cisco and whoever else are those food supplying companies to your favorite restaurant. We're all eating the same. The people think they're going to a different restaurant, but it all comes off the same. It all comes from the same warehouse. Owned by the same 3 companies. So you may go to Applebee's one day and you may go to McDonald's the next day. Well, it all comes from the same warehouse. It's not different. All the food from the grocery store comes from the same warehouse. Everything in our reality is because we do not produce things on our own anymore. So everything, and I mean everything, look at your phone. It's made from somewhere in Asia. The computer, if you got a computer, made somewhere in Asia. 9 times out of 10, the car you drive. It may be Ford, it may be Chrysler, Dodge, but it's not made here no more. And if it is made here, the supplies came from another country. Nothing in our reality is produced here anymore. I love it. I keep losing people. Heck yeah. Goodbye. Bye. Right? Everything in our reality comes off of a ship today. Everything. And it comes off a ship and then it gets on an 18-wheeler. And then it gets on an 18-wheeler and then it goes from that port all the way to wherever you live. Right? So, everything in our reality today, let's just say 2025, is based on commerce. Does that make sense? They said merchandise is all those things which merchants sell, either wholesale or retail. What's wholesale? Wholesale don't mean we go to Costco. Wholesale means we all work, all of our labor has also been bought. And we all work for somebody else. Remember when the country started? Everybody used to work for their families. Not everybody, but you know what I mean. Not everybody used to work for the or you were working for somebody else's family. But you know what I mean. Primarily, you worked for your family. I said this yesterday or the other day. I got this book called Erwin Rommel School of Law. They said, well, they weren't merchants when the country started. They were yeomen, and the definition of a yeoman in English law meant that you produce things from your own land. And what you produce, you could sell that because you worked, that was your labor, and your labor was not subject to a lien. It was inalienable or unalienable. I mean, you couldn't put, that means somebody else couldn't put a price on it. Prices can be put on it, but that means somebody else couldn't put a price on it. Does that make sense? That's what it meant to have unalienable rights. Your labor was supposed to be unalienable or inalienable. That word is interchangeable because somebody will say, oh, actually, no, they're both the same thing. But now, if you don't work for your family, me included, I'm not special, well then our labor is wholesale to somebody else. So that's under the guise of traffic and intercourse, especially if you work for a corporation. Almost all corporations are international. There's very few, and especially, I know I'm on a little tangent, but if your corporation is what they say publicly traded, or it's on the stock market, okay, well, anybody can buy that stock. Any nation can buy that stock. So that's all under the guise of commerce. And all of those things by which merchants sell either wholesale or retail. Right? Now, this is, I already read that. They say the slave trade, oh, actually, I got this. I looked up the word traffic in some old American law dictionary, and they have it 3-4 times. So they say traffic is under the guise of commerce. Remember, at that time, slavery would have been constitutional. This book old. This dictionary old. It says it not only this word commerce not only includes traffic. So they didn't use that word traffic lightly. They didn't. Everybody being on I-20 was not traffic. That's not traffic. Being in Houston on I-10, that's not what they meant by traffic. Going through Atlanta, that I know that's not traffic to them though. That wasn't traffic as understood in the Constitution. They said this word traffic was now they don't define traffic in this dictionary, but they use that word traffic under several words. One is hostility, the other one is the slave trade, the other one is a stock. They say that word stock, they got a thing called mer law. Okay, so that's mercantile law. They say the word traffic is used under the word voyage. It says a voyage with reference to the legality of it is sometimes confounded with traffic, in which the ship is engaged and is frequently said to be illegal. Who is this? This is Black's Law Dictionary. The first Black's Law Dictionary says that commerce is the specific contracts of sale and exchange. The next sentence says it is the intercourse of nations in each other's produce and manufactures. They said a general term, yada, yada, yada. They said transportation is by the Supreme Court of Iowa said that transportation is the means by which commerce is carried on. Matter of fact, I have this. This is the Supreme Court of the United States. They said that transportation is the means by which commerce is carried on. Without transportation, there could be no commerce. I read that earlier when I was talking about the Admiralty Law. They said the same thing. I mean, I read it earlier. So they said that any regulation They say without transportation, there could be no commerce. Any regulation of the transportation of interstate commerce, whether it be upon the high seas, the lakes, the rivers, or upon the railroads or other artificial channels of communication, operates as a regulation of commerce itself. That was the Supreme Court of Iowa. They were citing a Supreme Court case. This is the California Supreme Court. They said intercourse is for the purposes of trade in any and all of its forms, including transportation, purchase, sale, exchange of commodities. They said the power to regulate it embraces all the instruments by which such commerce may be conducted. Actually, that was the United States Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court said commerce is subject to the control of Congress and includes the transportation of passengers. That term commerce, as well as intercourse with foreign nations, includes transportation of passengers. So what is commerce again? Let me read it to you one more time. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions while I look up this stuff? Here we go. Perfect. They said the merchants of the Italian city-states took precepts from the ancient law of the Roman Empire. They said among the merchants of all Europe, and hence the body of business or commercial law, obtained the name law merchant. And they said within this law merchant is the law of agency, sales, negotiable instruments, insurance, carriage, debt, guarantee, stoppage in transit, liens, partnership, and bankruptcy. And it was made by these traveling international private merchants. Passengers like in a taxi, yeah, or on an airplane, or on a bus, or in an Uber, yeah, passenger. But passenger also has another, what they call, it denotes something else. I forgot what it was. Sometimes your goods, your property can be considered a passenger to them. See, that's a whole body of law right there. What did it say? I don't remember saying the word passengers. The law of agency, sales, negotiable. Okay, so for instance, they say the law of agency. Okay, well that's a subject of commercial law. I mean, this is a book called Business Law. And they said this law of agency, all agencies, whatever agency you can think of, is under the guise of commercial law. They said these people, the last book I read had passenger. I don't even remember. Oh, it may have been on one of these books. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's under the guise of traffic. Yep. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes. So when you're a passenger on a commercial vessel, okay, well the captain, whoever's driving or flying, the pilot or whatever, is the captain of that ship. And I'm going to get into it in a second, but there's only one type of court that can hear these things. All right, so let me say this real quick before I transition. The law of agency, so everything that may have to do with agency, what they call principal and agent, is under the guise of commercial law. Anything that has to do with sales is under the guise of commercial law. Negotiable instruments has to be under the guise of commercial law. All insurance is under the guise of commercial law. Carriage, which would include probably passengers, is under the guise of commercial law. Any form of commercial debt is under the guise of commercial law. Guarantee. I don't even know what that is, but it's under the guise of commercial law. Stoppage in transit. There we go. That's probably part of passengers. That's under the guise of commercial law. Liens. Okay, well that's under the guise of commercial law. And partnership and bankruptcy. That's all under the guise of commercial law. All right. Let me see. Yep, agency, sales, debt, yada, yada, yada. Okay, well. All right, Article 1 mentions commerce 2 times. Article 3 is the judiciary. This is the types of courts and what can go on in those courts. Okay, well, Article 3, I got a whole video on it on YouTube, but it talks about the types of courts and the types of cases that those courts can hear. So they'll say the judicial branch, the federal judicial branch, has a Supreme Court and then such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Actually, I have the Constitution right here. Yeah, so they said judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Okay, well, they mention commerce 2 times in the first article, and then they don't mention, or seemingly don't mention, commerce at all in Article 3, which is the judiciary, which has to deal with the courts, right? So they said judicial power shall extend to all cases. And these are the cases that they mention. They mention law, they mention equity, they mention arising under this Constitution and laws of the United States and treaties made or shall be made under their authority in all cases affecting ambassadors or other public ministers, and to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, and to controversies to which the United States shall be a party. And between controversies of the states and between citizens of the states and land grants and to yada, yada, yada. And then they got criminal law. All right, well, they say the trial of all crimes shall be by jury. Yada, 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 right? Okay, well, what type of court do they hear commercial matters in? Because they said they got law, equity, arising under the Constitution, arising under the laws of the United States, treaties, and then affecting ambassadors and public ministers and consuls. And then they say to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. They don't mention commerce as a type of case. But they said they had the power to regulate it. Okay, well, if somebody breaches a regulation of commerce, what type of court can they hear it in? Cordy. Does this make sense? Why? Well, because this isn't an American thing. Commercial law isn't an American thing. Commerce isn't an American thing. It's not even an English thing. This is from the influence of the major influences of the world. These are international things. They say anytime you talk about the principle or the law of agency or sales or negotiable, well, those aren't American. These aren't ancient English. This isn't of the Anglo and the Saxons. They said these come from somewhere else. And so, by nature of their usage or by nature of our participation of them, okay, well, only these things can be heard in admiralty courts. All right? Sounds good to me. Any questions? So, anything that has to do with traffic. What do you mean anything that has to do with traffic? Okay, that driver's license, that state ID, that car you're driving in, that they got information on. Okay, well that can only be heard in one type of court. They don't have no court called admiralty here. But they do admiralty every day. Why? Because they got to hear matters of commerce in federal court. They say a district court is a court of admiralty, but they don't call it an admiralty court. They call it a district court. Okay, well, what kind of cases can the district court hear? Oh, they can hear issues of commerce because there's only one type of court that can hear issues of commerce, right? Commerce, law merchant, same thing. Just like Canaanites and Phoenicians are the same thing. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear international claims. Anytime you participate in an international activity, that activity actually originates from somewhere else. It don't originate in the 50 states. It don't originate in a territory. It originates from another nation. This is the word intercourse, which is under the definition of commerce, is with foreign nations. They said this is part of that contract we were talking about in the Middle East. They say every time you get in one of these contracts, you're just like these nations along Europe, Asia, and Africa. And when you participate in international affairs, okay, well then you got to go to international court where they deal with international things. They say, oh, to them, this is no big deal. Oh, yeah, that's the only type of court we got. That's what deals with international things. Are you participating in international things? Are you participating in traffic? Well, what's under the guise of traffic? Oh, you got licenses, you have registration. Oh yeah. I'm not going to get into it today. Intercourse. Okay, well that's participating in the usages and customs of other nations. And navigation, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to act like I know everything. but for sure these two things, people talk about these two things every day. And only one type of court can hear it. And that's what commerce is in the United States Constitution. Where did commerce come from? Came from the Canaanites, came from the Phoenicians. They both are merchants. Merchants are people who use the practices of the sea and create contracts with different nations along the sea. They spread their influence to Egypt, Babylon, currently Rome. They started from the Mediterranean and they built contracts with Europe, Asia, Africa with their merchants. Commerce is the participation or the usages and customs of the law merchant, which comprehends trade, which comprehends contracts, which comprehend buying and selling. Sea, ships. So sea would be international, any other country. Ships would be the way how they did it. And then if you participate in these things that came off of one of these, then you're subject to commerce. And there's only one type of court federally that can hear these types of claims. And that is an admiralty court.